if you're dealing with a real estate agent that's upset with you and has contacted their lender and said, hey, I don't want this guy doing any appraisals on my transactions, you can start by just trying to talk to him.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And welcome everybody to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out once again with you. Have an exciting guest. Been a while, but I can't wait to reintroduce you to him in just a minute. First, want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored by three great companies. Of course, Alamode is the company that I use for my form filling software. Lots of choices out there, folks. Alamode has done it for me well for the last 20 plus years, and it will do a great job for you as well. Check them out. Go to alamode.com or 800-ALAMODE. DataMaster, of course, saving appraisers time, and thus when you save appraisers time, you save appraisers money. Check them out. Go to datamasterusa.com. Again, it's datamasterusa.com. Finally, we're sponsored by WorkingRE magazine, a place that I go frequently to find out what's going on in the appraisal world. You should be as well. Subscribe to their free newsletter by logging into workingre.com. That's workingre as in workingrealestate.com. And speaking of WorkingRE magazine, I have the editor-in-chief of WorkingRE magazine, good friend of mine and friend of the program, Mr. Isaac Peck. Welcome back to the program, Isaac.
Thanks for having me, Dustin. It's good to see you and talk to you.
It is good to see you. And we were talking off air. It's been too long since we've seen each other in person, but we'll, I'm still trying to get used to this virtual thing, but thank you for coming on and being a part of the program once again. As I mentioned, you are the editor of WorkingRE magazine. And I love having you on the program periodically just to talk about what's going on in the appraisal world, the appraisal space. I noticed that a lot of the articles in WorkingRE, just great information right on the cuff of what's going on in the appraisal world is written by yourself. Of course, you're not an appraiser, but dang, for not being an appraiser, you sure know a lot about appraising.
Thank you. I do my best, and I talk to intelligent folks like yourself.
Well, I wouldn't lump myself in there, but thank you for doing it for me. But I love the pieces that you come out with because they seem to be very, very present, very, right on what's going on in the world today. And one of the things I think that appraisers, unfortunately, spend way too much worry time on is this idea of blacklisting. You recently wrote a piece on blacklisting, and let's just start. I think set the table, if you will. Let's start with the premise of when you say blacklisting, what are we talking about?
So in the appraiser's context, we're talking about either being blacklisted, say, by a real estate agent or a broker. You could get blacklisted by an AMC or placed on what you might call a do not use list, or you could get blacklisted by a lender. And depending on the size and strength of the person who's doing the blacklisting, that may affect you quite a bit. We wrote stories on John Dingman way back, who got blacklisted by Chase Bank, and that was really far-reaching. But typically, when we're looking at, when we're talking to an appraiser, they're getting blacklisted by an agent or broker, or a local lender, or an AMC, and that in their local area, and that's causing a loss of work for them. And hurting their business. Right.
And I'm glad you referred to that idea of it really depends. If it's a local bank, that's one thing. Okay, well, gee, I'm going to miss out on some work. But if it's somebody as big as Chase Bank, that has far-reaching ramifications. I knew an appraiser that got blacklisted years ago from Flagstar. And the comment was, well, okay, I don't even do work for Flagstar. Who cares? Well, yeah, actually you do. You just don't know about it. and because of these incestuous relationships that a lot of these banks have, getting blacklisted by one big bank may have more of an effect than you think, even if you don't think you do direct work for them.
Yeah, exactly. The real power players, their do not use lists are passed around because sometimes the loans are being sold to other banks or passing through other banks. So it's definitely serious. It's serious in every instance, but it would get real bad, if it's a larger lender that places you on a do not use list.
And I started the program today saying that some appraisers are fearful of this, and certainly I would not advocate as a coach, as a mentor, I wouldn't advocate that we live off of fear, but I think that sometimes that fear is warranted in the sense that this does happen. Now, it's not frequent, that it happens, but it does happen to appraisers. Let's talk about why, Isaac. Why would a company like Chase, a local bank, a realtor, why would an individual blacklist or put an appraiser on a do not contact list or do not use list?
Yeah, so in addition to being the editor of WorkingRE magazine, I'm the vice president at OREP Insurance. And, we insure a pretty good percentage of all appraisers nationwide, and pretty regularly, we have appraisers coming to us and asking for advice on what to do if they get blacklisted, and that, explaining how it's hurting their business. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this story and kind of share some information about it. And typically what it looks like is, oftentimes it can be an appraiser comes in low on a transaction, meaning that the purchase price was for 400,000 and the appraiser might come in at 375, and that can really upset, say, the agents and the brokers involved in that transaction, or upset the loan officers, upset the folks at the bank, and that, from my experience, is the most common scenario. And if that were to happen, and the agent on the transaction is a particularly popular agent that sends the bank a lot of business, they might contact the bank and say, look, I don't ever want to see, Dustin Harris doing the appraisal on this property again, on any of my transactions. And we've seen it happen at larger banks. We covered a story several years ago where the bank manager sent around an email and said, I don't want to see this butcher, in all caps, ever submit an appraisal on our files again, right? So typically, if you do a bad appraisal and you're doing bad work, you could end up on a do not use list, because of your low quality work product. But it's more likely for you to face some kind of retaliation for a quote unquote low appraisal, and that could be from an agent or broker, or from a mortgage lender.
Well, I'm glad you used the quote unquote, because as we know, Isaac, language does make a difference, and we hear this term a lot, that you came in low, or you gave us a low appraisal. Low according to who, right? I mean, our job is to get a third party, unbiased individual or party, if you will, that truly reports what the market value is. And if that means that it's quote unquote below the contract price, or below the price that you need to get your refinance, well, so be it. I mean, otherwise, why do an appraisal? Why not just take the purchase price and say, well, that's what it's worth? And of course, every appraiser that's listening to this has heard the conversation 1,000 times. And unfortunately, Isaac, it sometimes comes from people who know better, bankers, or real estate agents, individuals who are other professionals in our area, that for whatever reason feel hurt that their deal didn't go through, their deal got squashed, even if they're on the other side of that. I've always found it interesting, and maybe I'm getting a little bit off in the weeds here. Maybe I'm getting a little bit of my soapbox. As you can tell, this is a topic that's raw for me. But even when they should be the ones calling you and saying thank you for protecting my buyer, for not making a mistake, we unfortunately don't get that call very often.
Right. And so it's particularly impactful if you make enemies, or powerful or popular real estate agents in your local area decide to quietly or loudly blacklist you. We talked to appraisers who, the two most popular real estate agents in their little town have contacted their banks and said, I never want this appraiser doing an appraisal, and they'll actually get orders for appraisals and then have them canceled within an hour or so. Because the agent calls the lender, or the agent will put it right in the MLS instructions and say, part of this deal is that Dustin Harris can't appraise this property. That's part of the conditions of the seller. And that, it's potentially illegal. That kind of behavior, right?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that specifically. What do you do when you get blacklisted? What are our options? I'm going to hold that till after the break, but right before the break, I want to ask you one other quick question. Obviously, appraisers want to avoid blacklisting as much as possible, not to the point that they're going to quote unquote skew an appraisal so that they don't get on that blacklist, or they're going to make it come in at value, or whatever term you want to use. That would be unethical. That would be a violation of USPAP, a violation of state law. And I don't think any of us would advocate for that. But shy of that, shy of fraud, how does an appraiser keep from being on a blacklist? What preventative measures would you suggest appraisers can do to avoid that?
Well, I think it starts with the quality work product, right? I mean, some appraisers get put on do not use lists for poor quality work. Sure. That's not typically what what appraisers contact us about. But definitely want to make sure you're doing quality work. And the other part of that is communicating well. right? Being able to communicate with the real estate agents involved in the transaction, communicating with the AMC or the lender folks that you work with when you're turning in an assignment. And if it doesn't look like, the value is being supported at all, you can always call the real estate agent and say, like, why did you price it this way, right? Did you have any comps that supported the list price, or what kind of market data can you give me, and see if there's any information that you're missing or overlooking, by talking to the real estate professionals that are experienced in your space, right? Maybe the listing agent, and et cetera.
Yeah, I think that is so key, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because years ago when Dodd-Frank came out, as you know, Isaac, a lot of appraisers unfortunately went to the extreme, and put policies into place where they really don't talk to anybody when it comes to the appraisal process. And really, if you parse that and you really look at the language, shy of sharing sharing with them confidential data and specifically value related issues, having conversations is not against USPAP. It's not against Dodd-Frank, and I think that we can save ourselves so much headache if we just communicate.
Right. I definitely think building relationships and communicating with the other professionals in your space, and really explaining yourself, especially if it's a hot button issue or an emotional issue, as many sometimes appraisals can be, being open to communicate about it. This is why, and asking questions in advance, kind of what kind of information can you give me that would support this? It shows the other parties that you're interested in being objective and that you care.
Friend of the program, Tim Anderson, always says it's not just about what you do, but explaining why you did it. And, if we can tell a good story, whether that be over the phone or more importantly in the report itself, helping them to understand why we came to the conclusions we came to, we're going to avoid ourselves a lot of heartache. Speaking of friend of the program, Isaac Peck is on with us. He is the editor of WorkingRE magazine. The title of the article that we are talking about is How to Fight Blacklisting. And of course, you can find that in the January publication of WorkingRE magazine. That is the hard copy. And of course, he publishes that online as well. You can find it online by going to WorkingRE magazine and searching for How to Fight Blacklisting. When we get back from the program, I want to talk more about what you do when it happens. What are our recourse available to us? But I want to pause here and just say thank you to Isaac for the content that they put out there at WorkingRE magazine. It truly is the go-to publication in the appraisal space. This is the publication that talks about our industry, talks about our career. And I'll tell you, I can't tell you folks how often I found out about what's going on in my own chosen career from WorkingRE magazine. Almost embarrassed to say that, I don't find out on my own. I find out by being in touch with people that are in the know, like WorkingRE. Folks, if you're not subscribed to their online and in copy, it doesn't cost you anything to receive that publication. Make sure that you're signed up. You can go to their website at workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. We are sponsored, of course, by Alamode. Alamode is the software of choice for my office. It is a great software that allows me to utilize tools that are just amazing. I was just on the line with one of my trainees who was working on something and making adjustments. And I said, "You do know about the Smart Adjust, right?" And he goes, "The what?" And we had a nice talk about this wonderful tool that will save so much time and so much energy if you just implement it. There are tools galore and so many tutorials on their website at alamode.com, or you can pick up the phone and call them at 800-ALAMODE. Speaking of saving time and money, we love technology, and we love technology that helps to save us time and energy. And one of those is DataMaster. If you are not utilizing DataMaster, folks, the first step is to go to datamasterusa.com and check out their coverage area. If they are in your area, if they are a member or working in partnership with your board of realtors, folks, what are you waiting for? This amazing product will save you about 30 to 60 minutes on every appraisal report that you do. That's huge. Do the calculations. It's absolutely amazing. Check them out. Go to datamasterusa.com. Again, it's datamasterusa.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We are talking with a good friend of the program, good friend of mine, Mr. Isaac Peck. He is the editor at WorkingRE magazine. We're talking specifically about an article that came out recently in the January issue called How to Fight Blacklisting. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for your time, Isaac.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dustin.
Well-written article about a situation that appraisers unfortunately find themselves in far too often, and that is an angry realtor, an angry banker, an angry lender, an angry AMC. Now, you've pointed this out several times, and I don't think there would be any listener that would disagree with this, that if you truly are turning in subpar work, meaning you're not doing your job as an appraiser, you should be blacklisted, right? The problem is appraisers are being blacklisted for doing their job. Unfortunately, there's far too many stories of appraisers that were willing to be courageous and brave and report the value, even though it may not support the quote unquote purchase price or the refinance level, and unfortunately have lost their ability to appraise for that certain company or other companies because of blacklisting. So let's talk about what to do when it happens. What's an appraiser to do, Isaac, when they get blacklisted?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that any kind of removal from a list or being placed on a do not use list or a low key blacklist that is in retaliation of you doing your job and providing an objective appraisal, that's illegal. And that's right in the Dodd-Frank Act, the 129E of the Truth in Lending. The real estate agents, loan production personnel, none of those people are allowed to pick appraisers. And they're definitely not allowed to, retaliate against them for providing an appraisal. So it's illegal, and how you handle it depends on kind of what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a real estate agent that's upset with you and has contacted their lender and said, hey, I don't want this guy doing any appraisals on my transactions, you can start by just trying to talk to him, and say, hey, first of all, you can try to explain to them in a very nice way that kind of behavior is illegal. They're not allowed to do that. It's against federal law. It's likely against state law. And if that doesn't work, you can consider talking to their broker if they have one, right? If they're an agent working underneath a broker, a lot of times going to the real estate broker and taking that same kind of nice, informative approach will do the trick, because the broker might be a little bit more mature, a little bit more reasonable. Another approach there would be, if none of those kind of strategies work, you can also try to file a complaint against them with your state board and or the local real estate association, because that kind of influence against an appraiser is against most realtors' codes of ethics. Pretty much all real estate agents, or the great majority of real estate agents, are realtors or members of a realtor association, and they have their own ethics, code of ethics that prevents them from trying to influence an appraiser and blacklisting or retaliating against you. And you could also try to get some traction on a state board complaint.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out. I want to reiterate a couple things, and if the listeners have a pencil and a piece of paper, I really want you to write this down, because you kind of said it almost as a throwaway, but it's so important. And by the way, you can get the language of this in the article that Isaac wrote. But Dodd-Frank Act, Section 129E, as in echo, 129E of the Truth in Lending Act, that is where you will find the language of how this type of coercion is absolutely against the law. It's against federal law when it comes to federal related transaction, which, let's face it, we do a lot of those. And you talked a little bit about realtors. Isaac, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me a little bit, I'm going to tell a quick story that I've probably told on the program before, and so I'll just give the highlights. But years ago, I had this exact situation. I had a very powerful and influential real estate agent who, let's just put it this way: the transaction ended up being his daughter-in-law, and she was unable to buy a home because that dirty, rotten Dustin Harris came in too low on an appraisal, and he took it upon himself to make sure that I would never do business in my own city again. And he, in fact, sat in a realtor board a local board of realtors meeting, and told his story. I was not there, heard about this third hand, that he announced what had happened. And of course, from his perspective, I was a dirty, rotten scoundrel and don't ever use him again. And we saw some fallout from that. And I'll tell you, Isaac, at first it was, what do we do with this? How do I handle this? And I'm glad you brought up the idea of communication. That's exactly how I handled it. I reached out to this agent. I invited him to lunch. He was very resident to come out, and I pushed him. And I said, I'm buying you lunch. Let's talk. Let's, talk. In fact, I think I used the term man to man. Let's have a conversation. And he finally reluctantly said yes. And we went out to lunch, and I sat down with him and I said, listen, I said, it's no secret what's going on here. But I want you to hear from my perspective. And the question I asked him, I said, what possible reason would I have to purposefully come in low, quote unquote, low on an appraisal? I mean, trust me, it's a whole lot easier to come in high, and I think when he heard that, he finally realized, well, maybe this guy isn't the schmuck that I thought he was. Now, I'm not going to tell you that everything turned around on a dime, but they did turn around, and he stopped bad mouthing, and we were able to recover from that. But communication is key, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely think, trying to communicate, educate, and explain is the preferred route to go. In some cases, the real estate transactions are emotional beasts. Real estate agents can get very upset. And your first option or your first choice should be to try to talk to the folks that are upset and explain and communicate. Because once we get into kind of filing complaints with state, local associations, federal, you're in a much more hostile type of scenario.
Yeah.
And I would say that applies kind of across the board. Whoever's blacklisting you, the story details kind of escalations of what you can do. You can file complaints with the state and with the local association. You can take it federal. There's federal agencies. There's banking agencies. You can file complaints with the lender. You can really kind of escalate this and fight back in a variety of different ways. But obviously it'd be preferable if you could just communicate and they could try to understand where you're coming from and you wouldn't have this escalating hostile conflict. In some cases you need to fight back though. So,
I'm going to ask you in just a few minutes. I'll give you a chance to think on this, Isaac. But I'm going to ask you what's coming up with WorkingRE magazine, or more importantly, what's on the horizon, the most important things that appraisers, topics that appraisers need to be concerned about in the coming year. But before we get to that, I wanted to emphasize one thing that you mentioned earlier, and I think it's so important to remember. And I think most appraisers forget. And I've actually been criticized for saying this on the air, but I'm going to say it all day long. You said it as well, inadvertently, and that is most appraisers are realtors. Now, let me repeat that. Most appraisers, I didn't say are agents, I said are realtors. The definition of a realtor, if you go to the actual definition, is members of the National Association of Realtors. I'm a member of the National Association of Realtors. I've never sold a house in my life, as an agent. And as a member of the National Association of Realtors, there is recourse there as well. As an appraiser, I take an ethics class every 2 years to be a member of the National Association of Realtors. And trust me, folks, when you go through that ethics class, it's mostly to do with buying and selling houses. Yes, that is true. But as a member of the National Association of Realtors, I happen to know that this type of activity we've talked about today is absolutely outside the realm of professionality and ethics as members of the National Association of Realtors. So that's another recourse, as Isaac has pointed out. So the article is called "How to Fight Blacklisting." It can be found in WorkingRE magazine in the January print edition, but also online if you'll go to online and just search out how to fight blacklisting. Isaac, you guys are always really, I can't say it enough. You're on the edge of what's going on, and I know you're very involved in the soup, if you will, of this career that we call valuation. Tell me what appraisers need to be concerned about or in the know about upcoming this coming year.
Well, we're running a fee survey this year in 2021. So I think the results of that are going to be really interesting. If any of your listeners haven't yet completed the survey, I definitely encourage them to go to WorkingRE and just fill out the survey. It takes less than 5 minutes. We got over 10,000 appraisers to participate in past surveys, and it really provides a cool picture, because once we publish the results later this spring, early summer, you'll be able to compare what the fees in your area were in 2010 and in 2017 and now in 2021. You can watch how fees have changed in your local area over the last 10 years. I think that's a really cool resource, and we encourage all your listeners and appraisers everywhere to participate in that. As far as what's kind of happening in the industry, we're still grappling with COVID. We still got appraisal flexibilities. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are working on new appraisal forms. And it remains to be seen kind of what's going to happen with the bifurcated kind of appraisal models they were testing before all this kind of kicked off. It's quite possible that some of the drive-by, exterior only type assignments that were done during COVID or that are still being done, I'm sure they're going to be looking at that data and analyzing it and seeing, if that ultimately makes the case or not for some of the bifurcated models that Fannie and Freddie have proposed. So that's kind of a big thing that we're watching, and that appraisers should be aware of.
Awesome. One of the things I love about WorkingRE magazine is, we're all about, the appraiser coach is all about efficiencies and technology and human resources and procedures that allow us to be better business owners. The nice thing about WorkingRE magazine, it makes it easy to find out what's going on in our industry, because that kind of stuff affects the decisions that we make as business owners. So Isaac Peck, great job, excellent article, and we look forward to more this year from WorkingRE. There are lots of moving parts right now in the valuation space, and we're glad you're there. Thank you, Isaac.
Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate it.
That was Isaac Peck, the editor of WorkingRE magazine. Again, you can learn more at workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.